Hello, this is novaTopFlex, and in this video, I will be finishing the HTTP Hypertext Transfer Protocol response codes. If you would like to know and learn more about the initialization and success codes, please watch my previous video on the 100 and 200 series. So let's start with the 300 series, redirects. So there are the codes 300, 301, 302, 303, 304, 307, and 308. 300 refers to multiple choices. This status code indicates that there is more than one possible response for the request, and the user agent must decide between the options for appropriate action, or at least should, rather. 301 indicates move permanently, which indicates that the requested resource has been permanently moved to the URL found in the location header. Identical to 301 is actually 308, which indicates that also the requested resource has been permanently moved to the URL found in the location header. Compared to 301, however, the request method is not modified for 308. The same relation is true for 302 versus 307, where the request method is not modified for 307, but it is for 302. Either way, 302 or 307, the requested resource has been temporarily moved to the URL found in the location header. 303, see other. This status code indicates that the browser should redirect to the URL Uniform Resource Locator, or really, for the greater scope, URI, Uniform Resource Indicator, found in the location header, instead of rendering the resource requested. This response code is often, but not always, the result of a put or post method, though the method of retrieval is always get. And finally, 304, not modified, indicates that there is no need to retransmit the resources required, which is a result of a conditional get or head request returns false. And I already went over 307 and 308. So now for the 400 series. And by the way, the 300 series, they were all redirects. The 400 series and 500 series codes are both for errors. 400 series is for client side and 500 series for server side. Let's start with 400, bad request. This status code indicates that the server is unable to process the request because of a situation considered a client error by the server. Typically, this status code is a direct result of, and I'm sorry for markdown errors, one of the following. Usually, malformed request syntax, invalid request message framing, or deceptive request routing. 401 unauthorized indicates that a request was unsuccessful because of a lack of valid authentication credentials. Sorry for the misspelling for the resource requested. This status code is sent with a www authenticate response header containing information on the authentication scheme that the server expects the client to include for a successful request. 402 indicates payment required. This is a non-standard response code that is reserved for future use specifically. The specific context of this code may vary dramatically from system to system. 403 indicates forbidden, which indicates that the server understood a request but refused to process it. Unlike 401, it doesn't matter if you have authenticated or re-authenticated or whatever. Authentication matters for 401, but it does not matter for 403. The difference is 401 is unauthorized and 403 is forbidden. Now you may know this one. 404 not found indicates that the server is unable to locate the requested resource. 405 method not allowed. It indicates that the server understands the request method, which is not supported by the target resource in question. The server must generate an allow header in a 405 response listing the supported methods. And go to the next page. 406 indicates not acceptable. This status code indicates that the server could not produce a response matching the list of acceptable values as defined in the request proactive content negotiation headers, nor supply a default representation for this acceptable value situation. Proactive content negotiation headers include accept encoding, and accept language. 407 indicates proxy authentication required, which indicates the request was unsuccessful because of a lack of valid authentication credentials for a proxy server between the client and the server containing access to the requested resource. 408 indicates request timeout, which indicates that the server would like to shut down an unused connection. 409 indicates conflict, which indicates the request conflict with the current state of the target resource is there, really. Sorry for any misspellings from my markdown presentation. 410 indicates gone. This status code indicates that the target resource is no longer available at the origin server. The condition is likely to be permanent. If server maintainers are unable to identify permanent versus temporary, 404 should be used instead of 410. The difference, 404 is not found and 410 is gone. And I could have said the same thing with 404, but that's just the difference. 411 indicates length required, which means that the server refused to accept the request without a defined content length header. 412, precondition failed, indicates that the target resource access was denied. When conditional requests on methods other than get or head are performed, and the condition defined by the if unmodified since, sorry for saying IT, or if match headers is not fulfilled, it's if unmodified since or if match, the request is unable to succeed, and this error response 412 is returned. 413 indicates content too large, which indicates the request entity is larger than the limits defined server side. 414 indicates uniform resource indicator URI too long, indicating that the URI requested by a client is longer than the longest that the server wants to interpret. 415 is unsupported media type, indicating that the server refused to accept a request because of an unsupported message content format. 416, range not satisfiable, indicates that the server is unable to serve the requested ranges. 417, expectation failed, indicates that the expectation of the expect header of a given request could not be met. 418, I'm a teapot. Now, this is one of the April Fool's jokes from previous years. If you remember other April Fool's jokes like IPOAC, Internet Protocol over Avian Carriers, 418 is a different April Fool's joke set. For instance, the April Fool's teapot joke is from 1998 and again from 2014. 418 is the teapot in HTTP. Yes, a teapot with HTTP. Really. Now 421 is misdirected request, which indicates the request was directed to a server unable to produce a response. 422 indicates unprocessable content, indicating that the server, while understanding request content type and syntax, could not process the included instructions. 423 indicates locked, which indicates the resource is inaccessible and is specific to select WebDAV servers. Note that some of these codes are WebDAV specific. If you remember, I believe it's 103 or maybe even 102, I'm not sure. 102 is actually a deprecated one, so I did not go over that in my previous video. But if you heard the WebDAV definition, or if you know what WebDAV is, then it's the same WebDAV as in the 100s codes. But WebDAV servers, and only select ones, use 423, otherwise a regular 400 may result. 424 indicates failed dependency, where the method in question could not be performed because the requested action depended on a separate action that failed. So even if the action could succeed, if the dependency fails, then the error code is 424. And switching slides. 425 indicates too early, meaning that the server was unwilling to risk processing requests to minimize the risk of potential replay attacks that may occur. 426 indicates upgrade required. This status code indicates that the server refused to perform a request with current protocols, but may be willing to perform the same request after upgrading to a different protocol. 428 indicates precondition required, indicating that the server requires requests to be conditional. 429 indicates too many requests, indicating that the client has sent too many requests in a given amount of time. Who knows what too many is? Maybe it depends on the server. Intending to slow down the rate of requests through a concept that is often known as rate limiting. 431 indicates request header fields too large, indicating that the server refused to process a request because of the excessive size of the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP headers of the request. And 451 indicates unavailable for legal reasons, indicating that the user requests a resource that is unavailable for legal reasons, such as legal actions that may have been issued. The 500 series, as I mentioned before, 400s are client errors, now 500s are server side. So there are only so many 500 series errors. 500 internal server error indicates that the server encountered an unexpected condition preventing the fulfillment of a request, while 501 not implemented indicates that the server does not support the functionality required for request fulfillment. 502 bad gateway indicates the server is acting as a gateway or proxy that has received an invalid response from the upstream server. 503 indicates service unavailable, indicating that the server is not ready to handle a given request. 504 indicates gateway timeout, indicating the server was unable to respond as a gateway or as a proxy to the upstream server in time to complete a given request. 505 indicates HTTP version not supported, indicating that the Hypertext Transfer Protocol version in the request is not supported by the server. 506 indicates variant also negotiates. The status code indicates that there is a recursive loop in the process of resource selection, and this infinite loop is returned during content negotiation. 507, insufficient storage, indicates an action could not be performed because of a lack of available storage to successfully complete a request. 508 is loop detected, not to be confused with variant also negotiates. 506. For 508, an entire operation failed because of an infinite loop will process a request with depth infinity. Sorry for any misspellings from my markdown, but 510, not extended, indicates that the client request declares an HTTP extension per RFC request for comments 2774 that should be used to process the request. However, this status code also indicates that the extension is unsupported. Now, from the request for comments 2774, per request for comments 2774 of February 2000, per the Internet Society, there is no official designation for an experimental protocol for the Internet community. However, various applications have proposed extensions to the protocol, including but not limited to mechanisms of distributed authoring, collaboration, printing, and remote procedure calls, and more, of course. Now, RFC indicates request for comments, while HTTP, again, is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And back to the previous page. One thing that I did not mention yet, but I should, is that 500 is usually used when the server cannot find a more appropriate error code. Usually, servers will try to find the specific 500 error code, but 500 is a catch-all for when you cannot find the specific one for your server, or really when the server can't. Now, 511 is network authentication required. This is the highest code official. This status code indicates that the client must authenticate to gain network access. While this status is not generated by origin servers, it is generated by intercepting proxies, rather, that control access to a network. And that's all I have for this video. Goodbye. Until next video.